Have you ever been in a place where everything seemed to fall apart? Where your dreams seemed distant, almost unreachable? Maybe you've been through moments where you felt abandoned, betrayed, or even forgotten by those closest to you. But let me tell you this, your story isn't over. Because no matter how deep the pit you may find yourself in, God still has a plan for your life. This isn't just some empty platitude, it's a truth that's been lived out time and time again throughout history. And no one exemplifies this better than Joseph, the man who was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, yet rose to a palace to fulfill a purpose far greater than anyone could have imagined. Joseph's story is a reminder that no matter how hopeless the situation may seem, God is still in control. His story isn't just a tale of survival, it's a powerful testament to faith, duty, and God's perfect timing. Joseph's life teaches us that God can turn what looks like a setback into a setup for something extraordinary. Joseph's journey began with a dream. He was the favored son of his father, Jacob, and as we all know, favor often stirs up jealousy. Joseph dreamed of greatness, visions from God that he would one day be in a position of leadership, a position of power. But his brothers, blinded by jealousy, couldn't see the purpose behind those dreams. All they saw was a threat, and they acted on that envy. Joseph, a young man full of promise, found himself betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect him. His own brothers threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and told their father that he was dead. Imagine the hurt, the confusion, the heartbreak Joseph must have felt. Here was a man with a divine dream, but instead of stepping into that destiny, he was cast into the depths of despair. And isn't that where we often find ourselves? Life throws us into pits of pain and betrayal. We hold on to dreams and visions, but the circumstances around us seem to crush them. We wonder, why is this happening? Where is God in this? But the story of Joseph reminds us that even in the pit, God is present. Joseph was taken to Egypt, sold as a slave in Potiphar's house. Now, it would have been easy for Joseph to let bitterness take root in his heart, to lose hope in God's promises. But he didn't. He remained faithful, and even in the house of a foreign master, God's favor rested on him. Joseph rose in responsibility and favor in Potiphar's house because of his faithful heart. But his journey wasn't over. Just when it seemed like things were turning around, Joseph was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Another pit, another injustice. But here's the thing about Joseph's story. No matter where he was, no matter how unfair the situation, Joseph's faith never wavered. He trusted that even in the darkest moments, God was still at work. You see, sometimes the pit is part of the process. Sometimes the adversity is refining us, shaping us for the calling that God has on our lives. Joseph could have given up, but he didn't. He held on to his faith, and because of that, God's favor remained with him, even in prison. But God's plan was bigger than Joseph could have imagined. While Joseph was in prison, Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had dreams that no one could interpret. And it was Joseph, still faithful, still trusting in God's plan, who was called to interpret them. Through God's wisdom, Joseph was able to tell Pharaoh that Egypt would experience 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. He also gave Pharaoh a plan to save the nation. In an instant, Joseph went from the prison to the palace. He was appointed as second in command over all of Egypt, given authority and power that surpassed anything he could have imagined. The pit was no longer his identity, the palace was his destiny. Joseph's rise to power wasn't by accident, it was by divine design. God had a plan all along, a plan that required Joseph to go through the pit so he could rise to the palace. His journey reminds us that sometimes the path to our purpose takes us through trials that we don't understand in the moment, but those trials are necessary for the fulfillment of our destiny. Now, the famine that Joseph predicted came to pass, and it spread far beyond Egypt's borders. His brothers, the very ones who had betrayed him, came to Egypt seeking food. They stood before Joseph, not recognizing him as the brother they once threw into the pit. Joseph, now in a position of immense power, had every reason to take revenge. He had the authority to punish them, to repay their betrayal with justice. But instead of bitterness, Joseph chose forgiveness. He revealed himself to his brothers, and in a moment that speaks volumes about the heart of this man, Joseph said, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. Genesis 50:20. What a powerful lesson. Joseph's loyalty was not to his past pain, but to God's purpose. He didn't let the bitterness of betrayal define him. He chose forgiveness because he understood that his suffering was part of a larger plan, a plan to save many. His loyalty to God's plan, even when he didn't understand it, was unwavering, and through his faith and duty, God used him to bring life to others. Now let's bring this closer to home. Just like Joseph, each of us has faced or will face our own pits in life. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted. Maybe you're in a situation right now that feels hopeless, like there's no way out. But here's the truth that Joseph's story teaches us. God is still at work, even in the pit. Joseph didn't know the full picture when he was thrown into the pit by his brothers. He didn't know how long he would be in Potiphar's house or how long he would languish in prison. But Joseph remained faithful, and God used every part of his journey for a purpose far greater than he could have imagined. The same is true for you. You may not understand why you're going through the difficulties you face. You may not see the full plan right now, but just like Joseph, God's plan for your life is still in motion. The pit isn't the end of your story. It's a chapter, not the conclusion. Joseph's story also shows us the importance of staying true to our duty and faith, even in the most challenging circumstances. He didn't let bitterness take root, and he didn't abandon his faith. Even when it seemed like all hope was lost, Joseph remained loyal to God's plan. He continued to serve with integrity, whether he was in Potiphar's house, in prison, or standing before Pharaoh. Today, we are called to that same level of faith and duty. Life will have its challenges, but like Joseph, we are called to remain faithful, to keep trusting, even when we don't understand why things are happening the way they are. So what does Joseph's journey from the pit to the palace mean for us today? It means that God's plan is bigger than our pain. It means that even when we're in the darkest pit, God is still working to bring us into our purpose. It means that faith, duty, and loyalty to God will always lead to something greater than we can imagine. Joseph's life wasn't about avoiding hardship, it was about thriving in the midst of it. His story teaches us that no matter where we find ourselves, whether in the pit or the palace, God's plan is still in motion. The challenges we face are not the end, they are part of the process. So today, hold on to your faith. Keep doing your duty. Trust that God is at work, even when it's hard to see. Just like Joseph, your story isn't over. You're not defined by the pit. You are destined for the palace. Trust in God's timing, and He will lead you into your purpose. Now I challenge you, what pit are you in right now? What challenges are you facing that seem impossible to overcome? Write them down. Reflect on how God might be using this season to shape you, just as He did with Joseph. Trust that He is not done with you yet, and step forward in faith, believing that the palace is ahead. Keep pressing on. Your breakthrough is coming.